Hey guys, Eternize here. In this video, we're going to explore a mixing approach called clip to zero. We're going to look at what it is, how you can use it, and I'm going to show you why this approach is better than the approach you're using right now. Let's get into it. Before we talk about what clip to zero is, I want to tell you a bit of backstory. I started to adopt clip to zero way before it was a recognized mixing approach. And I did that because I was looking for a solution to a problem that the industry had sold me. That problem was that you need to leave headroom. And watching this, you're probably in the exact place that I was, thinking you should leave headroom, right? Well, I'm here to convince you otherwise. And after like 15 years of using this method, I'm ready to tell you why. First, we need to understand why clip to zero is a more modern approach that much better fit the expectations of individual artists today. Let me explain. In many organic genres, organic meaning with live instruments, the process of making music is very well defined. You have the production stage, you have the mixing stage, and then you have the mastering stage. The production stage is where you actually play and record the music. You would then send the recordings to a mixing engineer who would put it together in an arrangement and mix it. And finally, the mixing engineer would send it to the mastering engineer who would push it to the desired loudness and do the finishing touches. This is the way it's always been and probably will be, because you have the stage of recording the music first. And in each of the steps, going from production to mixing and from mixing to mastering, you have to use sufficient headroom to give the next person room to work with and to avoid distortion. That all makes sense. However, you and me are sitting in our bedroom and we're producing electronic music all in the box. We don't need to use headroom. In fact, we don't want to, because frankly, it's just a hassle. And after 15 years, I've come to realize that headroom really does nothing for an all-electronic artist. And so you should only concern yourself with headroom if, one, you want to send your music to a mixing or mastering engineer, because again, they need the extra room to work with, or two, if you're using analog gear, because analog gear can color the signal even before it reaches clipping. Now, here's why clip to zero is a more modern approach and much more tailored to you and me as an individual artist. The expectation today is that you deliver a piece of music that is clean, loud, use modern sound design, is already mixed, is technically solid, and the list goes on. Basically, what's expected of you is that you produce the music, you also mix the music, and you also master the music. Now, the cool thing about the clip to zero method is that it literally promotes that you do all of these steps by yourself, and that you do it in the simplest and most effective way possible. So now, what is clip to zero and how do we use it? This is the general idea. Production, mixing, and mastering will all be done in the same project. No need to export to do separate mixing or mastering. Alright, so we're in a project now. Essentially what we do is that we mix every channel to the loudness that we want the final export to be at, and then we put a clipper in the end. So we let every channel go all the way up to zero and sometimes beyond, not using any headroom, and then we place a clipper in the end so that no channel goes beyond zero. Clip to zero should actually be renamed to mix to zero, because that's what we're doing. We're pushing channels up to the point of zero. Then you want to start grouping channels together. So you group the lead sounds, you group the low end, you group the percussion, and then on those group channels you also put a clipper in the end. And then those group channels can potentially also be grouped. And finally, they're all routed to the master, where they once again are limited at zero. And here I would also use a clipper for the final limiting. What this achieves is that the clipping and limiting happens in stages, right? We're chipping away small numbers at every stage. So the limiting is often really transparent because it's so small amounts at every stage. But because it happens in so many stages, it adds up to become all the limiting we need. Now, this is opposed to the traditional method where you would route every individual channel into the master bus and let the master limiter absorb every channel at once. This puts a tremendous load on this one limiter, and because of that, it often results in pretty obvious limiting artifacts. So the core difference between these two approaches is that clip to zero handles all the limiting in small stages on the fly, and the traditional method does all the limiting only at the end. Clip to zero will often preserve the transients and the general sharpness way better, and you'll most likely achieve more loudness as well. Now, apart from those advantages, I would say perhaps the biggest strength of the clip to zero method is that you get instant feedback on how your track will sound like as the finished product. With this setup, what you're listening to is the finished product. There are no steps after the export where you have to master in a separate project. This is the master. So whenever you make any changes in the project, the feedback is instant. For example, if things are distorting, you can instantly fix them in the project. That also means that when you're using reference tracks, these are now one-to-one with your project. So you know exactly what levels to match, what loudness you have to hit. It's a direct comparison. So if you're starting a new track, as you're producing, as you are putting things in the arrangement, do the mixing right away. Don't push it to a later stage. When using clip to zero, you know exactly what the final product will sound like. So there's really no reason to do the mixing at a later stage. By doing it right away, we're killing two birds with one stone. We're combining the production stage and the mixing stage. Now, for mastering, this is the beauty of clip to zero. Most of the mastering is already done because, as we discussed earlier, you've already limited your track in multiple stages. The actual process of mastering is also super simple because all you have to do is add plugins to the very last channel in your mixing chain. So when you add plugins, you get instant feedback on how the finished track is going to sound like. It's so flexible. It removes all the guesswork and all the hassle of having to export and master in a separate project. So if you're an individual electronic artist, I would really encourage you to explore this way of making music. It really combines and simplifies multiple steps and makes it way more manageable. It also really is a natural fit for electronic music because clip to zero does bring a degree of distortion and edginess into the music. But for genres like hardstyle and EDM in general, that's not a bad thing. That's to be expected and sort of a feature at this point. Again, I naturally gravitated towards this style of mixing simply because it was the most logical approach and also because it gave the best results. So guys, try this one out and let me know what you think. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.